Okay, okay. Welcome back, everyone. So, we will now start the third session, Living with Risks, Natural Hazards, and Human Vulnerabilities. I will first invite the session chair, Dr. PG Dhar Chakraborty. Now, Dr. Tuhin Ghosh, please join us on the stage for the keynote address. And I would also like to invite Dr. Saurabh Pal and Dr. Ronit Chatterjee to the dais, please. I would request the volunteers to hand over and felicitate Dr. Pal and Dr. Chatterjee with some mangrove saplings. Thank you so much, Dr. Chatterjee. Thank you so much, Dr. Pal. Over to you, sir. Thank you.
So we had very animated second session, and we face that future is very uncertain. Now we are entering into another uncertain domain, the domain of the risks. And risk, as you know, is a multiplication of the hazards, vulnerabilities, exposures. So here we have three speakers. Professor Tuhin Ghosh, who is the director of the School of Oceanography, and who is also of the Jagatpur University, who is also the co-convener of this international symposium. He will be delivering the keynote address. So Professor Ghosh is known to everybody because here most of the participants are from the geography and allied disciplines, and you are all familiar with him and with his works. That he is not only heading this center, he was also the lead author of the IPCC special report on ocean and cryosphere, and then also on the sea level rise. And he is also lead author of the urban climate science in UCCRN, etc. And he's also the India lead of the ESPA Delta, then Belmont Forum Deltas, and DECMA project, the Living Delta Hub. So he will be delivering the keynote address, and it will be followed by two other addresses by Dr. Saurabh Pal, who is an estuarine ecologist and a co-founder of the Estuarine and Coastal Studies Foundation. He will be speaking on the hazards of nature, cyclone, floods, and other natural hazards. So we had Dr. Jenia Mukherjee. She is Associate Professor of Humanities and Social Sciences in the Indian Institute of Technology. She had to speak on human vulnerabilities, social and economic vulnerabilities in Sundarbans Island. She was the first to respond. I remember in early December, I wrote the first mail to everybody, all the authors, at around midnight, 12 o'clock. And she was the first to immediately respond, and she said she's accepting our. But unfortunately, she's not able to come because there is bereavement in the family. I requested her to join online, but she's unable to do that. But she would be sending a presentation, which will be part of the proceedings of the conferences. So the human vulnerability aspect will not be discussed in the conference, in this symposium, but we'll have a lot of opportunity to discuss certain aspects of the vulnerabilities in other sessions. And our third speaker, Dr. Ronit Chatterjee. He has a doctoral degree in environmental management from Kyoto University, Japan. I had an opportunity to visit Kyoto University several times. Professor Rajiv Shah was heading that, and Rajiv's student is Ranit, and another student, Rajashri. He's also coming. He's now in IIT Delhi Center for Political Studies. He will be speaking in the ninth session, just before the final validity session. He's also coming, and he's having an experience of 12 years. He's been involved in various projects in countries like India, Japan, Nepal, Laos, etc. And he's also the co-founder of the RICA, along with Dr. Rajiv. and he's founding members of even Inspire Alliances, etc. He's a visiting faculty in number of universities. And this month he's also going to London to lecture for a month and a half. So I think this session will also very interesting. So I would not take any further time. Straight away, I'll request Professor Tuhin Ghosh to deliver his keynote address. Professor Tuhin Ghosh.
Thank you very much. I think everybody is tired.
Oh, nobody's tired.
I'm very much tired. This is my longest session chairing for 4 hours. So in my life. So I never did any session chairing for so long. Anyway. So anyways, try to preserve your energy and you need not to be scared. I will not be so long. I will not bore you. Okay. Yeah, that's true. So yeah, you need to be also prepared for tomorrow and day after tomorrow. It will be much more longer than today. Anyway, so what I thought that everyone will talk about natural hazards and all these things. But whenever we are talking about this kind of natural hazards like erosion, flooding, cyclone, and all these things in Sundarban area, whether we are having any kind of lesson, whether we are learning from that or not. So we tried to capture something from the recent cyclones, including the COVID pandemic situation. What are the lessons we have learned out of this? This is the Sundarban you know. I will not waste any time. And as Shunandu was also talking about this, that how much we have lost the forest area so far. And this is the largest mangrove patch and the only mangrove tiger land in the world. So when we are talking about adaptation, maybe 20, 30 years back, we have started talking about adaptation. But the tiger in Sundarban, they started adaptation much longer than we thought about. Okay. And this is the area, and 4.5 million is only for 2011 census. Uh, Unfortunately, there is no more data. So it's estimated maybe around 50 lakhs of people now residing in Sundarban. And the most important thing is that if you see the state growth rate, population growth rate, and see the South 24 district or North 24 district population growth rate, the Sundarban growth rate is almost double. So Sundarban is climate hotspot. Sundarban is most vulnerable, you know, from the previous session. But why then the population growth rate is so high in Sundarban? We need to find out. Extreme events. We usually talk about the extreme events in Sundarban region whenever we are talking with the community. They always talk about Ayla. Okay, so 2009, 25th of May. And there are a lot of devastation and very, very unlike that the path of Ayla, straight south to north. And it ended at Shillong, and 3 persons in Darjeeling and 1 person in Shillong died due to Ayla. Can you imagine? The damage and loss. Now the new concept came up, loss and damage. But for me, it's damage and loss. First the damage, then the loss. Okay. And whenever we are talking about all this new conceptual framework, you think about that, the sustainable development, and then millennium goal, then sustainable development goals, all these things are coming up one after one. And I used to say that this is new toy for the scientist. Nothing else. The adaptation fund converted to loss and damage now. Everyone forgot the adaptation fund. And there was no success in adaptation fund. Global Climate Fund, GCF. Nobody is talking about that. Now everybody is talking about loss and damage, as if this is the only solution for the people. And few people are talking about climate justice again. In the ILA in 2009, you see the CD blocks, community development blocks. These are the most affected: Goshaba, Kultoli, Pathar Pratima mostly, Hingolganj, Sandeshkhali 1 and 2. And others are less affected. But in ILA, actually, at least 63, 64 gram panchayats were inundated. In Amphan, we talk about Amphan. Amphan, in the media, actually, Amphan was more dangerous than ILA, according to media. Okay, but in Amphan, 6 to 7 gram panchayats witnessed the inundation, embankment breaching, rather than the Yash, around 15 gram panchayats, they have witnessed the inundation out of embankment breaching. This is the situation at that time in 2009. This is Goshaba region. This was Shajelia. I used to roam around and I have to go by a boat within the village. I couldn't locate myself because in 2009, I didn't have any GPS with me. So I don't know where I was. This is the situation whenever people are standing in a queue for food packet or water pouches. You see, people are starving. And at that time, the people only asked for some kind of water and a little bit food, nothing else. And a lot of NGOs that time, very much hyperactive NGOs were there. And I can remember in Bali Island, Bhupotida, one of my known friend there, he was sitting on the embankment, putting his hand on the head on 2 sacks of rice grain. And he was telling me what I can do with all these things. I cannot cook. I don't have any fuel. I don't have any utensil. So why they have given me? But at other hand, he cannot give it away on the river because nothing was there with him. So that was the situation. And you see the interior of the villages. What was the situation? And at that time, 3 days continuous rain was there, but nobody stored a little drop of water, rainwater. We couldn't convince people. We couldn't train people to conserve the or store the rainwater. Everyone was dependent on the water pouch. Okay. All other issues are there besides that kind of cyclones, sea level rise, land and river bank erosion, subsidence. This is 3 to 5 millimeter should be changed after the morning session. Uh, lack of upland freshwater sediment supply. Everything is almost similar to the previous section. I'll be a little bit faster. I think everyone is tired. So there are threefold impact of natural hazards in the Sundarbans or everywhere actually. So it primarily affects the ecosystem services, the land, water, biomass, air. Causes damage to all these sectors, population, gender specific, age specific, property, and negatively impact all these activities. So what we usually see that after any kind of disaster, what you see that there is some kind of emergency fund created. Maybe 200 crores for combating the situation. Where from this fund is coming? It is coming from the development fund. And in the development fund, what they do with this? They do all these things. So we are actually siphoning a chunk of fund from the development fund. Okay, at the name of emergency fund. And we are actually slowing down all these activities. So what is happening? We actually going for hampering the development processes and producing a less resilient society. And the next natural hazard will create havoc more than the earlier one. Okay, so we are talking about resilient society, resilient housing or something like that. And the impacts, all these things are there, and climate change is contributing a little bit more. And what are the impacts? in the social sector, in the infrastructure services, productive sector, and also in the environmental sector. So for one ILA cyclone, we can assess 4 sectors and 15 subsectors, maybe less, maybe high, we don't know. And we don't have that kind of manpower with us. Not the teachers, not the scientists, not the students, not the followers. Okay, that's a major concern. And in the long run impact, what is the consequence? It will come up with some kind of salinized soil. It will create problem with food security. After ILA, 4 to 5 years, they couldn't cultivate. And I can remember after the water recedes, there was some kind of this amount of 3-4 inches salt incrustation. Layer of salt was on the agricultural land. Ashish also there at that time, I can remember. Loss of productive land. So all these are connected with SDGs. It came much later, but we can connect now at this time. So there are a lot of things we can connect with SDGs, all the consequences, long-term consequences. And very, very little funding for so many people. So funding is crucial. Planning is crucial. Management is crucial. Sarah was telling about leadership and all these things, management. But again, I can say the knowledge is essential. And innovation, that is totally absent in Sundarban management or practice. In the morning session, everybody was talking about embankment, and embankment was going back. Every time embankment breaches, we are going back. Why don't we go forward towards the river? We don't have any technology. We have constructed seawall in the Digha on the sea. We cannot construct any river wall on inside the river. If we can narrow down the river, and the flow will be increased, and the sedimentation, the siltation will be washed away. So we are thinking within the box. And most of the time, whenever we are managing any kind of natural hazard, we are trying to come up with some kind of copy-paste measure. Control C, Control V. Okay. I can tell you one example that every school there is some kind of mock drill about earthquake. Okay. What is there? Hide below the table, hold the pair, wait, and then come out. This is applicable in the light structure housing. This is not applicable for this concrete structure housing. But still, we are following that because we have learned it from Japan. Okay, so whenever we are learning it from Japan, that is very important. If we learn it from Bangladesh, that is less important. And we never want to learn from Odisha what they are doing. After 1999 super cyclone, they actually on their own created on disaster management authority kind of department in their state before the NDMA and NIDM came up. But we never go to Orissa to learn from them. Sir will remember Kamal was there, Kamal Mishra. He was a genius. He was a very good friend of mine. He was a genius, really. Whenever there is any kind of evacuation, he used to say all the collectors, whenever you are talking to the people directly or through the camera, face the camera properly and look at the camera lens very rightly. So you need to be firm that you need to evacuate, otherwise we will forcefully evacuate you. And people usually, initially they were a little bit reluctant. Later on they realize they will force us. So better we evacuate on our own. So that is the thing we need to know from them, need to learn from them. But we are not in a learning process. But if I ask you that if there is any earthquake at this moment, where you will go? Below the table? No. If there is any beam, you need to be below that beam. If there is in the corner of the room, that is much safer. A safest place so far, that is the below the door. Ideally, there is one concrete here, there is one lintel here, and there is one frame. So if you see any kind of building after earthquake still standing, you will see that the door covers, the door frames are still there. The window frames are still there. So this is common sense, but we are control C, control V following Japan and having the mock drills in the schools. And we are actually teaching small children the very, very wrong thing. So that is the problem. We need to think out of the box. We need to innovate something. Anyway, so we have done some analysis regarding the flood frequency in the 19 city blocks. And you can see the situation. This is the highest one. So in this region, you can see. And Bashwanti, Goshaba, Kultoli, Pathor Protima, Hingalganj, they are most vulnerable from the flood frequency. From the cyclone, these are the blocks. Okay. So again, actually, Professor Pal was showing that northeast, southwest band kind of thing. It is following the same thing almost. Erosion, unlike this kind of coastal erosion, there is also erosion in the Goshaba region. Okay. And if we produce a risk map, Goshaba is always heading the map according to risk, and all others, Sandeshkhali 2, Pathor Pratima, Hingalganj, Sagar, Bashwanti are there. So this is the risk map. And Sarah was talking about the micro level mapping. In DECMA project, actually, we did village level risk mapping. But we couldn't show that because that is very cumbersome to show all the village names. But we did that. What are the consequences? Soil salinization, less agricultural yield, changes in river water salinity, less fish catch, mangrove species change. If the salinity increases, only the high saline mangroves will survive. As happened, Sundari is no more in our Sundarban, Golpata is no more in our Sundarban. But you go to Bangladesh, we have Mowli who are collecting honey. They have Mowli, but they also have Bauli. They are collecting Golpata with permit every year. Okay, so you can imagine how much Golpata are there in Bangladesh Sundarban and how much water they are having, fresh water. Okay, the problem is that with water, the sediments also coming and the Mongla port is being choked. That is another story, but it is true. Water logging in the productive land, lesser scope for new practices, and failed adaptation. Is there any specific adaptation plan for Sundarban region from the government or any non-government organization or any research institution? No. People are doing, those are not really adaptation. They are trying to coping. Okay. So just for example, solar energy was essential for Sundarban. But whenever the grid energy entered, the solar energy became obsolete. Okay. But at that time, the solar energy, use of solar energy was tagged as adaptation for 20, 30 years. Now it is obsolete. So this 20, 30 years, any adaptation cannot survive. It is coping kind of thing. Okay. So no alternative skill other than farm-based practices, and people are migrating out without any skill as daily labor. Is this adaptation? From our study, we have learned that the migrants are thinking that adaptation, that migration is beneficial. That is okay, fine. They are going outside, they are earning a lot, remitting it to their family members, and they are enjoying the things. And there is sharp division in the villages that migrants are having money, non-migrants don't have money. So the social cohesiveness is coming out brittleness is coming out. Okay, that is happening. That is okay. But the non-migrants who did not migrate it, they also think that migration is beneficial. You can think about the future of migration in the Delta. It will more and more you can expect. And there is no immediate solution, as Sir was talking about, asking about what are the solution. There is no immediate solution at this moment, from at least from my side. So what we will do? That is a big question. Okay. And this kind of natural hazards is kind of inevitable thing. We cannot really stop natural hazard. We cannot stop any cyclone. Please don't come. You go to Myanmar. We cannot say that. Okay. But disasters are not inevitable. So whenever the natural hazard or any kind of hazard or any kind of disruption creating some kind of problem with the people, infrastructure, economy, livelihood, everything, then we say that this is disaster. If there is any problem with this projection system, and if we can manage it locally, then it's not, it's kind of emergency situation. But if it is really, we need to call any technical person to repair it, then it's a kind of disaster. Okay. So hazards are inevitable, disasters are not. And you know that a lot of debate is going on that there is no natural hazard, natural disaster exists. The disaster comes up as we cannot manage the hazard properly. So there is no natural disaster. Okay, there are natural hazards, but not natural disaster. And we need to break that link through risk assessment of vulnerable population, preventive and impact minimization measures, preparedness and emergency response. I'm just sticking with few simpler things, not in big detail. So this is the only thing we can do for Sundarban disaster risk reduction, that breaking the link as far as possible to minimize the damages. We cannot solve everything at this moment. So the link up, who is vulnerable, and if there is any event, link up is like this. Whenever the vulnerability meets the hazard, there will be some kind of disaster. This is very simplistic. Okay. So basically, we are towards the disaster proofing of development. And my question is that whenever this is the disaster proofing of development, then in the development planning, why there is no disaster management plan? All over India, there is no disaster management component in the development plan. Why not? These we could not copy from other countries, unfortunately. There was no control C, control V was not working at that time. Okay. So there is some kind of paradigm shift we can observe, especially in the other states, that we used to do some kind of emergency management initially. If there is any kind of happening, we used to go with some kind of dry food and tripol and all these things and manage the situation. Okay, you okay? Okay, after 1 month, everybody forgets, fine. Come back to the same situation. Now we are trying to manage the risk and the underlying conditions that lead to disaster through these 8 parameters. And this is actually is being done much before the disaster strikes. And we don't know when disaster will come. It's kind of like exam, but we know the date of exam. But we don't know the date of happening, any kind of happening. Okay. And this is preparedness. So we are emphasizing preparedness. We are emphasizing mitigation also. And one of my PhD students is here, she is here. She has also come up with some kind of analysis with the mitigation capacity. Okay, everyone was talking about some kind of mitigation and whether the society they have capacity or not? That is big question. So mitigation capacity is also important. We cannot really recommend anything which is not possible, which is not practical. So we are actually responding to the situation initially. Now we are doing a lot of things, preparedness and mitigation. So the more we are prepared, lesser will be the impact and damage, like exam. The lesser the impact damage, lesser will be the requirement of rescue, relief, and rehabilitation. So emergency fund will be needed, will be less. Okay. And the development process will go on. Okay. So the society will remain resilient or become more resilient. So how efficiently and effectively we manage a disaster depends on how meticulously we are prepared for that. And the formula changes. Okay. So this is the paradigm shift. We were initially thinking about only vulnerability. Now we are thinking about the preparedness. So emphasis changed. Okay. And for example, Sundarban climate smart disaster risk management. If we talk about that, we have a lot of activities, for example, and we can recommend so many things, growth. Okay. So if we recommend something from that, okay, you can go on with some kind of canal rejuvenation or more robust embankment or something like that, plantation or something like that. What will be the expected growth out of that? In agriculture, in fisheries, in forestry, in water resource, energy, biodiversity. Everywhere we can get some growth, which is beneficial for the people, for the landscape, for the life and livelihood of the people and the local economy. So it should be integrated. We need to think about that. And we will produce more resilient society if we can get the growth from out of that. Okay. Coming to the recent cyclones, this is the Bulbul, Amphan, Yash. Still, Cyclone Aila is a landmark event. Initial observation is that impacts are varied and affected population groups are groups differently. Impacts are not uniform. Varied exposure and vulnerabilities has given rise to modified practices and better understanding of the problems. Okay. And all these Amphan and Yash, it was within the COVID-19 situation. This is new for us. COVID-19 was new. And within the COVID-19, Amphan came, then Yash came. So multiple disaster situation. Okay. Immediate and longer lasting impacts were experienced. Some of these immediate impacts caused onto longer lasting impacts. For example, embankment breaching lead to saline water inundation. And for 2 years, 3 years, in longer time, they could not cultivate. So what are the impacts? Standard of living impacts, shortage of drinking water, sanitation access, loss of electricity, mobile connectivity, loss of belonging asset, general well-being affected, health impact, mortality, morbidity, access to health services, food security, lacked money to buy food because in the COVID-19 situation, and I met a lot of people there, elderly people during the relief distribution, that I did not come to collect the relief for the cyclone. I came here just to collect the relief for COVID-19 because we don't have any earning. We don't have any income. Okay. So that is there. And people lacked money to buy food. Essentials were more expensive after the cyclone. Saline water inundation affected stock grains. All this happened. Environmental impacts, uprooting of trees, damage to mangroves, pollution from dead fish and livestock. Livelihood impact was immensely felt. Lost access to source of livelihood. Lost the livestock, fishing gear and net, fishing boat, everything. Badly affected agriculture, salinization of cultivable lands, and salination of ponds. Ponds are important livelihood factor in Sundarban region. So later on we realized, and 2 years back actually we produced one edited volume on ponds of Sundarban. We have mapped entire Sundarban ponds, and infrastructure impacts were there. Okay, impacts on the gender equity failed heavily. Gender-based violences became more high. Trafficking and child marriage. And I can remember still after ILA, there was no toilet in several households. I went there, and the child marriage was there because the girl child could not use the toilets. So they put the girl in another house as their mother-in-law. It happened, a lot of houses. This is the damaged housing in the Ramganga area, Pathar Pratima. In the Gangasagar beach, you can see the shops destroyed after Amphan. During Yash, again in the Kumirmari, Goshaba, you can see the water embankment breaching and water entering into the land area, and it entered from the southeast, and the water logging was in the northwest part because the topography is something like that. Local knowledge. So this is the local preparedness. They put some fishing net on the roof of the house. What we have done actually for the actions actually to reduce hazard by government of West Bengal, they took some kind of mangrove plantation planning, and the cyclone Amphan caused extensive damage. The mangrove is a natural buffer or bioshield kind of thing. So these two actions taken to reduce the hazard. Actions taken to reduce the vulnerability. Relief has been provided by government, NGO, corporate, but there is no pattern, there is no control, there is no kind of EOC or something like that. So that's a big problem. And I used to see that a lot of people are doing the relief operation, but at that time there was some restriction, COVID restriction. So people actually tried to come out from their house and go there and have some fresh air. So I used to say that that kind relief tourism was there in that time. Most of the cases I have found. Hazard resistant housing. So individuals, not government here. Hazard resistant public infrastructure. Government has constructed multi-purpose cyclone shelters, and that was used that time. But again, whenever Professor Pal was talking about the housing structure, the Gitanjali Prakalpa housing plan is something different what they are doing. That is on some kind of pillars. Okay. But everywhere in Sundarban, you will see the people constructing their house from Gitanjali Prakalpo, they're getting money from that, but they are constructing normal house. They're not following the design. There's a big problem. Actions taken to reduce exposure, accurate forecast and early warning system. That is kind of a big achievement. IMD is doing really, really good things. At least 5 to 6 days before we can have the news, and they can properly come out with the landfall area also. So this is amazing. Evacuation, government, NGO and individuals, securing roofs in places with fishing net and nylon ropes, communities, but there is no presence of government for this kind of adaptation, this kind of preparedness, any kind of mitigation. So that's a very difficult area. And again, stocking valuables on higher surfaces, covering all these things. There is no staging ground for these islands. So communities are doing all these things on their own. Stocking asbestos tin sheets, shopkeepers stocked asbestos tin sheets prior to cyclone years. And whenever there is problem, the 300 rupees, 400 rupees asbestos was being sold at 1,500 rupees. So black marketing was there. Okay, that is the opportunity. And recovery rehabilitation is differentiated. It reflects resources. Those in guaranteed formal sector job were less adversely impacted, but migrating to other states, few people, switching livelihoods, few people, and funded from their savings, out of loans, migrating out at a later date to repay the loans. All these things were happening, prolonging the process of recovery and rehabilitation. It actually depended on the local economy of the area. Reflects politics, differentiated access to relief and compensation. And there are a lot of controversy, debate came out in the social media and also in the newspapers that proper people were not being compensated. Reflects economic value of land whenever it is Ganga Sagar. So every year there is Ganga Sagar Mela, and there is all the PHE, PWD, all departments are there. So within few days, they recovered everything. But in other places in Goshaba, I can remember after 3 months, 4 months, the lampposts are like this, and there is no electricity like that. So it depends on the locality. Reflects the gender. Families and especially children are seen at their priority before, during, and after the disaster. Food utilization becomes an issue, and all these things I'm not going for detailed things. And what they did actually, women before disaster arrange dry food, clean drinking water packed by dry clothes, untether the livestock, pack essentials, putting them in secure places, assist men with securing roofs. This is before disaster. Men secure roofs, trim branches of trees, secure boards, pack essentials, effort to secure weaker embankment. So some kind of beyond their household, they are thinking, the men. Women during a disaster mostly stay within the safe shelter, take care of children and elderly. Men during the disaster mostly stay back in their homes, keep an eye out for damage to embankment, again, beyond the home. And women after a disaster, clean debris from house, unpack essentials and reorganize the items in house, arrange food for the family. Men during a disaster address damage to housing, either by makeshift means of using bamboo and tarpaulin, or making repairs, remove uprooted trees, pond maintenance by draining the contaminated water, bury the dead livestock and fish. So this is the anti-tethering livestock in Korakati, Santashkali 2. This is the Rangabelia multi-purpose cyclone shelter. And I think I should stop here. And afterwards we will take the questions. Okay. So we should have some kind of recommendations are there. I will provide one booklet, so where that is everything can be available. Okay. So thank you very much.
Good evening, everyone. So while they are making the presentation, I must say that my presence here on the dais is most unlikely, considering the galaxy of teachers that I have seen and their profound knowledge from which I have gained. I thank, first of all, I must thank my colleague, friend Siddhartha, who put me in touch with RKM Very. Then definitely Professor Dhar Chakraborty for giving me a chance, and also to him sir for always giving me the support to carry on my research. Anyway, myself is Saurav, and although I will not be able to talk to all the natural hazards because my experience is not that, my work would be more at the micro level, and I will start this talk with the theme of optimism. I would say that I have purposefully taken this picture and put it on the first slide because yes, there is an apparent cyclone while I was depression rather, while I was working at the Sagar Island along with my students. But I did see that without gender biasness, without age biasness, people were desperate and people maintained their life. So whatever be the vulnerability, there is always a sign of resilience. It's a human resilience. That's why I did put up this picture. This is a common picture that we generally see in Sundarbans, so I will not talk about. It's a picture of destruction, damages, different cyclones have done over the years. However, I will definitely dig into some theories of cyclone. So these crisscross paths are cyclones that have gone through Indian Peninsula over the more than 100 years. And now our country is not in a very fortunate condition as we are economically losing a lot, as you can see the numbers. Now, there in the popular, I always believe between segregating dogma and science. A dogma is what I say, you have to accept. A science is what the data said. If it is a bitter tooth, still I have to accept. So if you have a look at this data, it is coming from our government. So taking our government in a plain head, we have to believe the 120 years of data. The first one is of the frequency, that is in the Arabian Sea, the blue, and the red one is the Bay of Bengal. Clearly, there is no evidence that the cyclones are increasing. Rather, it is decreasing. Yes, it is increasing if you think of the Arabian Sea. The reason is Arabian Sea used to be much colder. The rate of sea SST increase, surface temperature increase is much faster over there considering their colder nature, its cold nature. If you think about the severity of cyclones, I know that the projections are made that the cyclones would be more severe in the coming days. Okay? I am not denying any projections. So far, I do not have any evidence. Because projections are generally made on the data on the past history. The past history of 120 years of India is in front of you. You can make your own mind. Data speaks for itself. And yes, there is a slight increase of that trend in the Arabian Sea, not in the zone of Bay of Bengal where Sundarbans falls. We can break it down a bit more farther. What generally our perception is the cyclone comes in the hotter months like the April, May, and so on. And then there are cyclones after Durga Puja, generally in the months of October, November. As the trends of another 120 years, you can see in front of your eyes, there's a highly likelihood that these winter cyclones would be more intense rather than the summer cyclones. So when we prepare, how we draw our hazard maps, what to mitigate, what not to mitigate, that should have a good coexistence with the science. So we may be mobilizing more resources for preparedness for winter cyclones. May not be that much for the summer cyclones if we believe in climate change. Now, as in the morning, there was a discussion of the cyclone science. So with a PhD scholar of mine, we have dug down the data and you can see how the cyclone science is developing in India. from 1980 onwards. And as I see that cyclone Ayla and the super cyclone, to first extent, the super cyclone of Odisha was the trigger point in India when people started taking cyclones and these sort of natural hazards very seriously and started putting up efforts. And then came the age of cyclone Ayla, which again, a big cyclone in the history of this country in that sense, and a lot of literature sprouted and followed after that. And now after COVID-19, a lot of literature again, and I believe as we are advancing as a nation, more literature will come up as the decades are progressing. Now, I dug down it bit farther. What are the basis of, we were trying to actually dig down the history of India's cyclone research. How it started, when it started, which are the subjects that started it. It's basically the physics which first led it. Then it's still the highest, like how the cyclones will be changing, what are the parameters that are generating the cyclones and all this stuff. Definitely it has a lot of impact on human lives and livelihoods. The social sciences papers followed, but there are very little number of papers if you think of biology. And when I say papers, I am basically taking two repositories. One is Web of Science and then is Scopus. This is just a disclaimer. Now, since this, the number of, and this is up to date, I think Paulash and I did this exercise somewhere in the month of October 2024. So this is the status, okay? So till this point, India has biology or cull papers of 57, which is very less. For a country like India, 57 papers exclusively on cyclones on biology is nothing, literally nothing. So where my effort was coming down, this talk is also how our students, young generation people, young researchers can build a program for the country. So in 2017 and 18, when I re-entered back in India, and I was searching for research programs and I was interacting with the people, I did not find a single long-term or concentrated program for cyclone ecology in the country, anywhere in the country. So my restricted expertise helped me to put my effort only in ecology, and I started doing ecological programs with very tiny resources. And all I want to say that I had this small dinghy. I don't know why it's not going. Anyway, it's a small dinghy through which my students and I from that's all. From a small dinghy, we used to do this research in 500 meter, 500 meter, 500 meter distances of Muriganga estuary. So you may say, okay, this is a very dingy research, very small effort. I acknowledge that. But I didn't, this is how the cyclone ecology research program of the country has actually started. Before to that, I did not get a single paper which looked at multiple cyclones or even interperiods of cyclones. Now, all I wanted you to focus the sampling dates, the frequency, and the cyclone hits. And the design that we followed, we used to go at least once in every month. If there is a cyclone happening, we used to ramp up our effort to go for high frequency. Then it used to get back to the normal frequency to see what are the before after impact assessment, because it is very important to establish any cyclone research that you do a before as well as an after assessment. And mobilizing any resources of any kind of research just before the cyclone and just after the cyclone is always a challenging factor. Since I'm an ecologist, my effort was mostly concentrated on food wave. And in the food wave, I follow the lower food wave. For simplicity, I'm saying I just followed the path of plankton. What are the plankton? These are very small organisms that float on the water. And surprisingly, however, these animals or the plants actually contribute 65% of the global oxygen. So you may think that you may plant a tree for oxygen. Unfortunately, we cannot plant the plankton, but if the plankton are vanished in one day, we are losing 65 to 70% of the world's oxygen. So that's what it's important. Now, I won't dig into any papers because these are there. All I want to give a story of resilience. So what is the resilience story that I want to give? These are tiny animals, right? So when there was a cyclone, they were kicked out or they just swept away from their homes just by the sheer velocity. But you see that even they do have the resilience. They are coming back to their homes, to their niches within 10 to 15 days, at least 50% of them. So cyclone doesn't necessarily always mean all things are lost. Don't synonymize it with a negative word always. Then the kings never get affected. Be it in the Sundarbans, be it anywhere in the world, if you are well resourced, if you are well adapted, you never face a challenge. As this distinguished panel have discussed severally, the preparedness or the adaptability is the key of success, surviving a very extreme event. And if you synonymous this guy, this small plankton bestiolina, and assume it is the king, it never gets affected with any of the cyclones. It comes back and it remains, it maybe its number gets down a little bit, but it remains where in its top position. Well, so we practice or we read books of plankton or ecology or from many environmental science from United Kingdom, from Europe, from United States. But remember, those books, those literatures are often written after 60, 70 years of experiments and readings and data. Most of our projects, most of our funding, most of our efforts are very short term. So to match their prediction with our data, I don't know whether it's a good practice or something we should try or should not try. So although I read those books that the plankton are very good indicators of the water quality changes after cyclone, but at least from my efforts, I could not have a conclusive results. Now, when it comes to the other stories of vulnerability and resilience, yes, there are apparent vulnerability, and I will not go into that because my teachers, my professors, and the distinguished guests, they have already put so much into it. all I want to say that there is in the human nature, there is always resilience that we can bounce back. Maybe it's a salt tolerant seed, maybe some engineering efforts. We have partially reclaimed our agricultural efforts. So from the 2010 and 2015, contrasting features are in front of you. Some of my students, they are very intern students. They are doing some work with Korobi here also. They are focusing on the Mosuni Islands, and they're actually studying the fate of embankments over the temporal period of time. But I don't know, as we have discussed, I will not divulge into it, that what is the essence of throwing so much money into the water without some preparedness, without some strategic plans, or without some engineering measurements. It's just to show off, and that is what the results bring up anyway. So these are evident results. These were happen to be, and I don't know. So Dhar Chakraborty sir was definitely asking for some solutions. But what solution you can give to these people who, yes, they may be marginalized, they may be forced. I'm not saying that somebody is like just willingly living there, but if you are living in the edge, then you might have the mentality to prepare for the edge. Sometimes your life can be on the edge on any given day. So for these people, for these sort of ecosystems, or for these sort of like adaptations, short-term adaptations, short-term livelihood options, I don't know. I have no suggestion for it. Again, the students have done some opinion surveys, and they have asked different questions. I have listed that. I think, Korobi, they might have surveyed around 600 or 700 people in the Mosunia Islands. That's how their results looks like. But one thing I want to say here is this cyclone shelters. The government, as a plan of preparedness, have built cyclone shelters. But cyclone shelters without are also acting as temporary residents for many people for months, right? But are they meant for that? In the cyclone shelters, you do not have basic facilities of devising the basic facilities caring for women and children. Cyclone shelters are built in areas where many don't even want to go because it is very far from their land. And as Tuhin sir has said, many of these are, and the previous also the experts have said that they are mostly the agricultural, fishing, and livelihood, the communities which have their, animals. So where they go, they leave everything and they go to the cyclone shelter. What are the options for that? Did the government think about it? I don't think they have thought about it. This could be also put into the plan when cyclone shelters or something like the rescue shelters are built. Now, while I was carrying out this work as a scientist, this call came up and I did participate, and I'm being recognized for my efforts. So from them onwards, many of these, I have to expand the program and make it more multidisciplinary. So we are working right now. One of the puzzle that I wanted to solve, but before jumping into the puzzle, I want to be a bit patient over here and take all the audience a little bit slower. So this is, I think I can talk. This is a government data. Okay? I'm a blank date. I am not biased to anyone. This is a government data. The government data, as per this, well, I can read from there better. This, this, this is a government data. It has mangrove covers. It is the ISFR 2021 data. It has mangrove covers of different states. Okay. And it starts for, I am just reading out the West Bengal part of it, because 42% is under Sundarban part. Anyway, in the India's data. So in 1987, the Sundarban used to have, as per the government says, 2076 square kilometer. Okay. Now, when is the cyclone Ayla? 2009. In 2009, it is 2152. Okay. Then 2021, 2 years within the cyclone Ayla, 2155. That means 3 square kilometer increased. So many of us are saying that the cyclone Ayla have affected mangroves, but the government is saying the mangroves have increased. Okay, fine. Then when is the cyclone Feni, cyclone Bulbul, cyclone Amphan, cyclone Yas? All starting from February 2019, then November 2019, then May 2020, then June 2021. And most of the period is covered under COVID-19, where your mobility is restricted. Okay. Now I'm reading out the data, the government data. So 2019 is 2,152 square kilometer, and 2019 is 2,112, 2019, and 2021, 2,114. Again, the mangrove cover increased. My question is, during the pandemic of who is planting mangroves, how the mangroves is increasing, despite a notion that the cyclones are detrimental for the mangroves, or cyclones are creating a havoc with the mangroves. If you think of the maps over there, the mangrove cover of the West Bengal has significantly decreased and then stabilized. The Gujarat is on the increase, and Andaman, which used to have large, very lush mangroves, it has declined heavily and then stabilized. Now, Devjit was saying about the character of the mangroves, right? If you tease out the mangroves of India, yes, the total cover is increasing. The total cover might be increasing, but you see that mangrove health comes from the density, from the diversity. It's actually decreasing. So we are creating open mangroves. And by doing this sort of plantation, what we are gaining? Since already Devjit has says, we cannot certify them, we cannot earn money from them, we cannot do anything from them literally. Economically, they are not providing enough economic sustainability to the locals. Then why should we do that? Okay. So there is a question, what sort of mangrove cover we want to have in our country? Anyway, but then you come to the academic reports. I believe, growing up with the academia, so I am inclined a little bit towards the academia. The academic figures are not matching our government. I am just reading out the numbers and the English, nothing more. So when there is a policy, the policy should be transparent, policy should be accurate, policy should embrace everyone. But at least there is some disjunct in the number, in the quality, in the data, and everything. Thanks to the government of India, and I was part of it, the first India Mangrove Conclave happened in December, and it has produced this strategic roadmap for the country, which has already started its implementation through Ministry of Art Sciences. So we will have a node like a central agency, then we'll have some mangrove cells for the country, just like the Maharashtra has. Then we will take participatory actions for certain periods and certain periods. And this is how the 10-year roadmap that the government of India has already set, and the ball is already on roll. So this may come as gazetted form in some point of time, any day, but this is the recommendation that has been forwarded by the committee, and it just happened, a wonderful thing for the country. Finally, if you think of the disaster management plan, there may be different components. I am not competent enough to uh, put all enlight all of these together, but I represent here as a non-governmental platform. So our efforts from the foundation is to educate people, mobilize people, make them aware, do hands-on, do mobilize them in the field, provide them necessary resources, and also to participate as well as host different local and international programs. That's we do. Mostly we are young people, and we are trying to train a lot of coastal community and the school kids and the colleges and the university students, so that, as sir has mentioned, that always we have less number of people, less number of champions who can take up the action. So one of the suggestion that I have for this roadmap is to championing the subject. Unless you champion the subject, there would be very less number of people, youngsters involved, and you will have a policy or plan in the silos, not the future generations taking it up. A part of it, this is the last slide almost, that we also launched a program for the ocean literacy, and we are mobilizing resources for conferences, be it national, be it international, be it planting mangroves anywhere. Okay, so this is just to championing or to enthusiase or sensitize young people. And this is not only science, this is not only arts, this can also be an expression of mind. This guy who has done this painting and the expression of mind belongs from Ghodamara. He was angrily saying that why I should be put in a refugee colony in Sagar Island, seeing my home is still standing in Ghodamara. Can you answer me? So he expresses his anger, he expresses his frustration, he expresses his mind through artwork. I thought it also gives a message for the coastal community. Thank you very much for giving me this platform. One minute, sir. Live stream হচ্ছে। আপনার এটা তো একটু ঘেটে গেছে।
Good evening, everyone. I'll keep myself to 10 minutes. If I cross, please let me know. Okay, I'll stop. I think a lot have been said, and most of the things I think has covered on engineering aspects, some on the social aspects of how you can manage Sundarbans. One part somehow felt is missing, and I will try to focus on that, which is the intangible asset, which actually has kept Sundarban and which has actually presented to you Sundarbans as you see it now. But Sundarbans was not something which has happened recently, right? It has been there. It has evolved. It has also developed. And when we talk about disasters, there is this vicious cycle of development and disasters, which is interlinked. So Sundarban has been going through it over a period of time. Possibly we are putting stress on our mind that how can we manage it within our lifespan, and many people might have before us also have done the same thing, and people after us also will be doing the same thing. So it's a process, right? uh, by the way, there are few people in the room. There were many in the morning, but of these few people, how many of you actually are very clear about the difference between these two words, damage and loss? Or how many of you are not sure about this difference? Can raise the hand. Then I can focus on that, or I'll move to the next slide. You want? Okay. So damage and loss are, I'll say in a very simple term, damage is something which you can repair, which you can reverse. Loss is something which you cannot reverse. It's a long-term, non-reversible process. Okay. Sundarban, of course, you all know that Sundarban is a World Heritage Site. These are the two criterias, and that's what makes Sundarban not only appealing to us who all are in the room, but also appealing to the world. And if you look into all the presentations that have been presented before me, many of them has been talking about the physiologies and all the other things which are highlighted in red. And you would see that there is an interplay of a lot of things which is happening there. But if you know gist it out, it's basically the flora, fauna, people, and all the other things which actually makes this environment, biosphere, part of is Sundarbans. And when we talk about tangible and intangible heritage, again, I am not going into the details of what is tangible, what is intangible, but there is, when we talk about damage and loss, the problem is we generally, and I think also Tuhinda was, sharing some time back that what was the impact of various cyclones, and many other people also have been talking. So what we are presenting is what we can see, what we can perceive, what we can quantify. What we cannot quantify, and this is possibly an inherent problem with our researchers, that we like to play with data. And the moment we feel that there is no data, we just try to shy away. And this happened also during my PhD, that my professor was saying, you are willing to go into an area where you possibly won't find data. So sometimes you have to trade into that. And when we talk about tangible and intangible, tangible is possibly the tip of the iceberg here, which is what you see, which is what you capture after a disaster event or any hazard event, where you do a rapid need assessment. This is generally the process. Like government would start a rapid need assessment, then they will go into a post-disaster needs assessment, and they will try to prepare a recovery, plan. Then they will go into, and then it will look into 5 years, 3 years, 5 years, 7 years, 10 years, and after that, possibly, it will go into that development cycle. But the problem is, no one actually looks into those kind of plans. Don't look into this part, which is possibly the 99% of the part below the water, which is difficult to capture in short time, which needs possibly long-term, longitudinal, interdisciplinary involvement, and also the community ownership and driven initiatives. Because This is basically the crux of what we have been talking. We have been discussing whether people should shift out of Sundarbans or not. But are the people willing to do that? Who are we to decide? Who are we to decide that? So that's something. And this is what I was talking about, that if we talk about Sundarbans in very simple term, it's a intertwined, kind of a system of tangible and intangible heritage, which actually makes it interesting to the world, makes it interesting to all of us, and where the people and the ecosystem services are in the center of it. And the issue here is people take ecosystem services for granted, that it is for free. So we should exploit it as much as possible without giving it back. And that's the problem with Sundarbans. And that's not only the problem with Sundarbans, but that's the problem with everywhere in the world. And what we have been discussing is actually an outcome of that. So when we talk about UNESCO's approach, they say that intangible heritage actually looks into all this: oral traditions, performing arts, social practices, rituals, which are part and parcel of our daily life. And I'm sure all those researchers who have been talking have actually been part of all this when you are going to do data collection, when you are again and again interacting with the people of Sundarbans. But this is possibly the kind of the core of why people want to say, why I think the last speaker, Dr. Paul, was also sharing that people are angry that why I cannot go back to my land, because that's the sense of place. That's what binds them to this, the intangible heritage. And we are not talking about it. So if you look into, like, I tried to look into this ecosystem services, and there are 4 services which we generally get from the ecosystem. And if you look into the customary practices that of Sundarbans, you actually can put it under this 4, like social cultural practices, then early warning systems, diverse, and these all can be put under the the 4 ecosystem services gains that we get out of it. And all of these are getting affected either because of the uncertainty which is being coming because of the changes in the intensity, severity, whatever you call it, of the various kind of natural events which is happening there, and also that transformation which is happening, it's because of the development process. So these two play on this whole system, and it's a system. We have to understand it as a system. It cannot be understood as in silos, like, okay, we will take care of the sedimentation process, we will take care of the mangrove, we will take care of this. It has to be understood in the system, and that's very important for having a holistic approach. It's very difficult, I understand. Theoretically, I can say that, but somewhere the approach has to be changed. It cannot happen with own disciplinary expertise and say that, okay, this is how it should be done. And sorry, I think there is a bit of change in the whole presentation format here. But when we talk about this non-economic damage and loss, if you look into IPCC's recommendation and what we are talking about also in the recent Santiago framework, networks, and also COPE, non-economic damage and loss talks more about mobility, mortality, and mental well-being. But non-economic damage and loss is beyond that. It's about your sense of place. It's about your livelihood links, skill sets. It's about your traditions, the market and its linked features, the safety nets, health implications. And these are very evident. Like, I think Tuvinda was sometime back shared a paper where he documented the medicinal values of the mangroves. Or if you look into, even I have another slide which talks about the bone BV's importance and how the customary regulatory mechanisms, which has actually kept the way Sundarban has been. It has actually possibly reduced the rate of deterioration, the rate of disruptions. It might not have completely, be able to manage the kind of erosions. It might not have been completely be able to manage the flooding, but it has possibly reduced the rate. And that's what we can do. We can always look at, like, the temperature change would be 1.5 degrees. Okay, now we are saying, okay, we have reached 1.5. Now, let's try to stop it before it goes to 2 degrees. We are trying to slow down. We cannot stop it. We cannot stop the natural process. That's something we have to accept. And that's where the customary regulations as part of your intangible heritage comes in, because it's something which possibly is the most effective kind of policy or guidelines which people make and they follow. And that has been there in Sundarbans for a very long time through various kind of activities, through various kind of uh, interventions, which has evolved over a period of time. And if you look, like, say, for example, the Bone BV's customary regulations, if you put it, you can actually put it under this protection, provisioning, regulating, and cultural services, and then analyze that it. And if you look at it closely, you will see that it has a positive impact on the whole ecosystem services, which actually also helps in continuing your livelihood, which also helps in reviving your social aspects. So this is possibly something which has a much longer, and it's already a kind of time tested solution which is there. Only issue is when we make policies, we just possibly negate this, and we create conflicts where we put the government policies over the top of this, and this gets eroded. And that's what has been happening. And in any such disaster events, this whole erosion pace is accelerated. You have migrations, you have disaster induced displacements, you have so many other factors which actually helps in accelerating this pace. So my last slide, I'm sure I'm within 10 minutes. What can we do? Because this is about thinking further, that what can we do? What new can we do? Why don't we try to look into the various policies? Like, see, we have the coastal zone management policies. Are they in tandem with the customary regulations of Sundarbans? Are they, supporting them? Are they negating them? How are people accepting it? Whenever you put something on top of your head and say that you have to do it, there is a tendency that the people will not accept it. They will reject it, and that's where there would be a conflict of interest and policies. Second thing, like as I said, possibly we feel that this kind of intangible heritage is part of our daily life, and we live it. It's a lived experience, but because it's a lived experience, we don't map it. And if we, as we don't map it, we also don't know where are the risk points within that interlinkages of various disciplines which actually exist within this intangible heritage. So this actually cuts across various disciplines. It's just not one single discipline. Third, the development of assessment methodologies for intangible heritage. There is no such methodology because you cannot actually give a financial value. You cannot quantify, but at least there should be more qualitative approaches to, and maybe, and this you cannot generalize. So you possibly have to generate it for Sundarbans. And this is a very good opportunity to do that. And lastly, having more we are all researchers, so why not having more longitudinal studies focusing on intangible heritage as the core of the development of Sundarbans, rather than looking into various other disciplines and trying to have those trying to catch one part of the elephant and trying to define the elephant. Thank you so much.
Hello, hello.
Time schedule is maintained in that.
Talking of damage and loss. Now, is it possible for us to quantify? We quantify the damage. Is it possible for us to quantify the loss in the context of the that discussion is going on? Damage and loss, fund, etc. The COP has created. So, can Sundarban also be mapped or damage and loss and projected globally? That look, this is also a place where we are suffering a lot of loss to our intangible heritage also.
Yes, sir. Very interesting question. And I think, yes, it is possible. We can do, provided that we try to understand these linkages intricately. Because if we don't go into the layers of it, it's actually, then it would be very superficial and giving a value to the damage, the losses would be very difficult. So what can be done is we can phase it out. Like generally, even for the word resilience becomes very vague as a term if you do not benchmark it against a disaster event to show that, okay, this has been what is working. So we are proposing a lot of things for resilience without any benchmark. Same thing for this damage and for the loss. If you segregate, like say, for example, 5 years, 5 years, 5 years, at least a monitoring, long-term monitoring system, that would actually be a more helpful approach for, I won't say it would be a foolproof approach, but it would be a starting point to show that, yes, this is possible. And then I think, yes, that's why researchers are there to evolve and take it further. But I think it has to start somewhere, and Sundarbans could be the starting point.
One question from both of you.
Can I add on to it?
Yeah, please.
I think, Ranit, I don't know, possibly you have tried these intangible assets or intangible values could be mapped through externality analysis. They are not necessarily be fully quantitative, but perception based. And this is a method well established in economics. So, well, this is definitely not the GDP measures, but yes, so to some degree, those externality analysis could give a value for the intangible losses that Sundarban is facing.
And we actually tried it out in Nepal as well. My PhD was after the Nepal earthquake in Nepal. And there we tried to assign certain economic value to the intangible heritage loss based on discussion with the community and understanding, also verifying it based on the other linkages, so you can justify that economic value, and then it would have an error, percentage of error, which is acceptable. But at least knowing an economic value is much better than just creating a consensus document that this is what would be the loss and let's plan. And that's why the Nepal recovery failed. That was one of my research findings, that the whole plan failed because they did not have any understanding of the informal sector recovery, nothing about their 96% of the Nepal economy is informal, but the whole informal economy was consensus that, okay, that was the loss.
That kind of benchmarking for value the intangibles will be maybe highly localized or maybe regionalized. So there may be a number of such standards in a country like India, which will be very difficult. For cities, there might be some different kind of valuation, and for rural areas. So what I am saying is, so is there any existence of any standard such value benchmark anywhere in the world, since you are a researcher in that line, please?
No, there is no such standardization. It cannot be standardized because intangible heritage, again, like say, for example, if you're talking about local livelihood and the skill set, it's very difficult to standardize. So here, what you can do is you can have a fixed component and a variable component, right? So you can have the fixed component standardized, but the variable component will always be there. And that's the beauty of intangible heritage. If you try to fix it, then your intangible heritage becomes tangible. So I think we have to appreciate the beauty of intangible heritage, accept its flaw. We accept moon as the most beautiful with its flaw. So let's accept also intangible heritage with its flaw. But saying that it has a flaw, so not it's not beautiful is possibly not the right way.
Again, there is a concept of loss which is reparable and irreparable. Sometimes reparable loss is capital. Loss which are not irreparable. Again, another concept, or you're saying that the number of cyclones are not increasing. Intensity is increasing, but not increasing. But but at the same time, we find the sea surface temperature is increasing in Bay of Bengal. The Bay of Bengal is higher than than any other ocean in the world, or any other sea in the world. So, so when the sea temperature is increasing, then there are lot many atmospheric depressions also generated in the Bay of Bengal. Why it is not transformed into a number? Why the number is not increasing? So is it just a that's a train for 10 years, or it is a long-term train, or is or in the recent years we found, in fact after the COVID, every year there are 4-5 cyclones. Numbers are increased. Maybe over a period of 10-20 years it has not increased, but in recent years it has increased. So what
No, well,
Before your answer, I have just put the other question. Since you have referred the data from IMD, but in the system, I should say public domain, IMD data is available where they have calculated from 1880 to 1900, sorry, 1880 to 1900, and then onwards, and they have shown that since the existence of this IMD office, which is the oldest office in India, Calcutta, the number of cyclone has been increased in the Bay of Bengal. Number of instances of cyclone in Bay of Bengal and in Arabian Sea. In case of Bay of Bengal, they have concluded that about 33% increase, and for Arabian Sea they have commented that about 13 to 14% increase. So including, they have given some absolute numbers, like earlier used to be 10 to 12, now it is almost sometimes 18 to 20 number of cyclones are being generated. Not all coming to the shores, in fact. So this is a contradiction. When you shown that slide, it struck me very strongly because it's a contradiction. The same set of what I should say, the same institution, either one or the other wing, is coming up with contradictory reports. Since you are not the person who has done all this research, we are to search. But this is a question, because in other set of documents they have very categorically said, and we are aware of that also. Okay.
Are increasing, but the number of cyclones which are landfalling at Sundarbans, that may not be increased over a 10-year period. But if you take a longer time frame, then you will certainly agree that the numbers are increasing. Because not all cyclones from Bay of Bengal are affecting Sundarbans. Some of these are in the
No,
Tamil Nadu, some in Andhra Pradesh, some in Odisha.
The statisticians, being a quantitative person myself, is we know how to play with the data and how to present the data in a very the way that we want to look. That's the fallacy of statistics. So there is one way of looking how many cyclones being generated. they may not even cross India, but generated in Bay of Bengal and dissipated in Bay of Bengal. There are cyclones which being generated and ripped through India, but it is definitely coming through the same department, same scientists, putting up the same data set. So that's what somewhere in my talk, what I wanted to say is that a policy should be clear, policy should be transparent, and the transparency only comes from your accountability, not from mysteriness. That was one of the talk's message that I wanted to give, that there should be differentiation between dogma and science and science-based policy making.
So I think any other question from the audience? Please.
Yeah, my question to Tuhin sir. I'm just wondering that in one slide you have put more focus on adoption and migration, right? Yeah. As we know, the Kiribati Island is also sinking, right? And they have adopted something like migration with dignity, this kind of concept. So why not for Sundarban we can do this kind of things, as if you have so much experience in this field. So I'm just asking you, what is the barrier for India, maybe not specifically for Sundarban, for India, why we can't adopt this kind of strategy, as if we are more focused on what would be the outcome of this symposium, right? So is it we can do something like that?
Okay. If I properly understand your question, actually what is happening here, uh, in our recent research, we have tried to interconnect the climate change, putting the climate change background in the background, that the what is the role of the ecosystem services. You please sit down, no problem. What is the role of the ecosystem services, how it is actually influencing the livelihood of the people. Okay. And whether it is putting pressure or not. So climate change is regulating the ecosystem services. Already a few speakers already highlighted that part. And these ecosystem services is putting pressure on the livelihood of the common people. And they are trying to overcome the situation. Okay. And whenever they are trying, there is no government guided documents or something like that, that you can do this, you can do that, like that. Nothing is there. Only few routine training courses under the Department of Forest or something like that. So like beekeeping is one of the most popular training activity in the forest department. And people used to go there, have the daily allowances, have the food, and have some instrument, some beehives, box beehives, and some nets and all these things. After coming back, they actually sell it out. That is a common thing is happening there. So the problem is that people are trying to come up with some kind of solutions to overcome the situation, to minimize the gap in their income, livelihood. And there are some kind of emergent livelihood is coming up, like tourism. Okay. But who are the investors? The city dwellers. And the people there, they are actually being used as kind of a labor, 3,000, 4,000 rupees, something like that. Some little bit economic boom is there during the tourist season in the local market. Otherwise, there is no such benefit or very low percentage of benefit. So what the people can do? And they don't have any skill. Okay. If you think about 50 lakhs of people in Sundarban, at least 40 lakhs of mobiles are there. But you roam around the entire 19 blocks, you will not get one specialized, skilled mobile repair person. Okay. And if you go there, you will see that 7 to 9 skill development centers are there in the vast area. What are the courses in those areas? Whether that is suitable for the people there? You go to Orissa, In 5 coastal districts, at least 60 skill development centers are there. And the plumbers, the jewelry makers are famous from Orissa. But our Sundarban people, they are migrating without any skill. So they are not getting decent job. They are basically primarily going to the construction sector as daily labor, or the hosiery, or the back factory, or sometimes plywood factory. But they don't have any skill. These are for male. For female, they are doing the same thing what they used to do at their home. Cooking, taking care of the or home housemaid, or taking care of the patients, elderly people, children, like that. Nothing else. So the skill development is a big factor here. And if you provide some skill, which is important for the people to get some decent job, so you have to put pressure on the skill development sector. And that's why they are not getting dignified job outside. And the skilled people from other states, they are actually going towards Europe and Middle East. And the void is actually being filled up by the unskilled labor from the Sundarban. That is the Indian scenario.
So let me add, question. You are talking about Kiribati. Kiribati is the first state, first country in the world which get submerged due to sea level rise. And there the population of Kiribati is just 200,000, 2 lakh. So you can think of, migration with dignity for 2 lakh people. They can be settled in Fiji Island, or come to Australia or New Zealand. Or for example, Maldives. It has a total population of 300,000. I think population of Narendra is higher than that of Maldives. So the people of Maldives, they can be resettled otherwise, and people are quite rich there because of tourism. So they're buying land in Australia and New Zealand, and they're making arrangement for sale. But when you're dealing with a population of 2.5 million people, 5 million for Sundarban as a whole, but in the forward islands, there are about 2.5 million people. Now, how do these people migrate with dignity? Now there will be some parts like in Mosami or in Boramara, etc., which are going to. So there we have to have a policy of migration with dignity. So that would possibly be one of the recommendations for that. The islands which are going to sink and which we cannot save, we have to identify those islands, and from there people have to migrate because there is no other alternative. So for them to migrate with dignity, government have to come out some policy, some incentive, some compensation mechanism, etc. So these are going to be definitely part of our recommendations. But for migrating in that 2.5 million people with dignity, it is an impossible task. Where will they migrate? What will be their livelihood? They are organically linked with these places they are living. So the places where we do not have immediate threat, places which can be saved through embankment, or saved through plantation, or saved through other alternate means of livelihood, saved through the climate resilient, saline resilient agriculture, saved through modern technological devices, saved through modernized fisheries. There are so many alternative ways we can increase the livelihood opportunities of people. And there are small little projects in Sundarban where we have demonstrated, scientists have demonstrated that it is possible to generate livelihood, increase their income by 5 to 6 times, and build their resilience. So we have to explore those opportunities also. We cannot just give it up that you migrate with dignity. 25 lakh people migrating with dignity, where will they migrate? So it's not possible. So we are here to find a solution. So thank you for raising the question. And then,
Just to add, along with Professor Dhar Chakraborty's response, one thing you should remember, that is there any policy for the displaced people? No. But whenever the people encroach the national highway or encroach the railway track nearby areas, they are being compensated. But whenever they are displaced, they are out from their own habitat, there is no policy for the compensation. Number one. Number two, if you look at the Gitanjali Prakalpo, that is the Awas Prakalpo, housing loan and housing assistance. The clause is that you need to have your own land. This is not for the person who is displaced from his or her own land. That is another problem. There is no way out. Okay. And second thing is that uh, we are from the city, we are the scientists, so-called, and we are educated, and we are telling the solution to the people that, okay, you need to evacuate the place and you should go to the peri-urban area. They are doing that on their own, but we are trying to impose them all these things. We are not considering the human cost. There are a lot of people in Sundarbans, they never seen train. Okay, they don't want to come to the peri-urban or urban area. So we are compelling them that this is good for you. We are not going to hear from them what is good for them. That is another problem. Okay, thank you.
So unless there is any other question, so let us close the session here. It's almost 8. Oh, you have a question?
Okay. Although I asking a lot of questions on the hall, but sir, I remember that you have gathered a lot of NGOs once, put them together for, and in Sundarbans, as you have seen, as we have seen that a lot of the so development, a lot of the preparedness being mobilized from the NGOs, not directly from the government. So, and there are so many NGOs are operating over there on different sectors. So what sort of, advices or the suggestion that you have for the NGOs to put them also in this sort of policy framework?
Yeah, that's a interesting, actually not question, comment. I once tried, because whenever I was roaming around the Sundarban and I interacted with so many NGOs, big or medium or small, I found that the NGOs are working with some piecemeal kind of things. So 3 years with sanitation and health. Then after that, there is no continuity. After that, they are getting fund for maybe saline salt resistant farming. Okay, so they are working for 3 years. Then they got some fund for trafficking, women trafficking. Okay, so I tried to gather all these NGOs, come up with, in the one umbrella, under one umbrella, so that they can interact with each other and they can complement each other. Initially, there are good response. 3-4 meetings we organized in Jadavpur University itself, and after that, then gradually the yeah. So there was some kind of competition came up between them, and they were not ready to disclose their style of work or some functioning framework, everything. So then they stopped coming to the meeting. So that's the real problem. Okay.